Taijun rushes to his desk, frantically shoving his belongings into a bag, desperate to make a quick escape. He can't fathom how anyone could have bypassed the supposedly impenetrable security system without triggering an alarm. The sound of approaching footsteps jolts him, and he quickly grabs a hidden firearm. The intruder steps closer, warning Taijun not to run, adding that it would only make things worse. Taijun's heart pounds as he turns slowly, and to his shock, he recognizes the man. It's Giulio Parenti. Giulio calmly pulls a gun from his pocket and points it at Taijun, accusing him of impersonating him. Stunned, Taijun denies it, but the mafia boss counters, saying the evidence clearly implicates him. Beads of sweat gather on Taijun's forehead as he insists he knows the real culprit and begs for a chance to explain. Giulio, however, cuts him off and fires a warning shot near Taijun's leg, coldly blaming it on his bad mood. At the villa, Hana wakes up to find Eunseong sitting beside her bed. Annoyed, she scolds him for barging in without notice, but he defends himself, explaining he was worried she might feel pain once the anesthesia wore off. With a calm smile, he reminds her of his duty as her bodyguard and his responsibility to keep her safe. As he inspects her injury, he asks if that is where she got hurt. Hana assures him that Parenti already treated her, complimenting his skills. Eunseong agrees, praising Parenti's expertise and noting that they didn't even need a doctor. Their conversation pauses when Hana mentions she's thirsty, leading to an awkward silence. They exchange a brief, lingering look before Eunseong softly asks if the mafia boss might have feelings for her. Hana snaps back, "What was that?" flustered by the question. Breaking the tension, Eunseong hands her a glass of water and delivers a message from Logan, who called while she was asleep. Logan informs her that Mujin Kang will have a bodyguard at the Valentine's Day party. Then, Hana immediately remembers Logan mentioning earlier that Mujin Kang was why he came to the area in the first place. Eunseong adds that all she needs to do at the party is find a man named Oslo, who will be standing next to Mujin Kang. Presently, in Macau, Giulio and Hana are getting ready for the party. Hana sits in a vanity, fixing her appearance, when Giulio enters the room. He leans down, pressing gentle kisses to her shoulders, but she frowns slightly and accuses him of crossing a line. Feigning innocence, Giulio asks, "What did I do?" before smiling and asking if she's ready. Angrily, Hana snaps, asking why she wouldn't be ready, then questions if they really have to share the same room. She points out that it doesn't seem like a good idea. Giulio calmly replies that they have to because she's pretending to be his partner, and people will be watching closely. Frustrated, she shrugs his hand off her shoulder and asks him to help zip up her dress. As Giulio obliges, he kisses her back, prompting her to immediately remind him they don't have time for distractions, they have a party to attend. He smirks, admitting he's not particularly eager to go, but if they must, he wants her to look captivating enough to draw everyone's attention. Hana rolls her eyes and asks if all this is really necessary, and he assures her that it is, explaining that in games like these, the person who believes they hold the upper hand is always the first to act. Startled, Hana asks if he's implying that Mujin Kang will come looking for her. Giulio nods with a sly smile. Giulio leans in to kiss Hana, pulling her from her thoughts. She notes how much more physical he's become with her since that night, as though he no longer feels the need to assess or test her. Wondering if she should play along, she decides it might not be the worst strategy for now. If he keeps acting like this, he might eventually let his guard down. A sudden knock at the door interrupts them. Hana looks surprised, but Giulio calmly assures her it must be her equipment. He retrieves a box from the door and hands it to her. When she opens it, Hana confirms the contents are top-notch. Inside, there's a bracelet laced with sedatives, a necklace concealing a small bomb, and even hairpins designed for stabbing. She tries them on and asks Giulio for his opinion. He compliments her, noting how striking she looks. Hana shifts the conversation, asking about the cruise ship they're supposed to board. She mentions seeing it docked earlier, but Giulio explains that the ship is just a display, a fake vessel for tonight's pre-party. Offering his hand in a gentlemanly gesture, he helps her to her feet, and they prepare to leave. As they step outside, fireworks light up the sky, and the sheer scale of the event becomes apparent. Hana takes in the crowd and realizes this is where her brother is, or at least, where he's waiting for her. Even if he isn't on this boat tonight, she believes he'll be on the cruise ship tomorrow. As they enter the party, Hana is struck by how extravagant it is. The number of people and their curious stares make it difficult for her to keep her composure. Giulio notices her discomfort and teasingly tells her they're staring because she looks stunning when she's aroused. Hana immediately denies being aroused, but Giulio smirks, asking why her ears and cheeks are so enticingly flushed. Before she can respond, someone calls out Giulio's name, exclaiming that it's been a while. Hana recognizes the woman before her as Sei Jang, the wife of a notorious Red Mafia mobster and Giulio Parenti's former lover. Standing beside her is Yuri Petrov, a high-ranking member of the Red Mafia and the CFO of the Petrov Corporation. As Sei greets Hana warmly and even calls her one, she grows suspicious. How does this woman know her? Her unease deepens when Giulio pulls her closer, prompting Sei to lean in and whisper her hopes that Giulio isn't simply trying to please his ex. He responds coolly, "Is that what it looks like?" Amid this charged exchange, Hana spots a familiar figure, Cyril Kuzmin. She hadn't expected to see him here, especially after their last encounter, which ended with him hospitalized years ago. It momentarily slips her mind that he is Petrov's right-hand man. Sei, ever perceptive, asks if Hana is of Korean descent and compliments her beauty. Before the conversation can develop further, Giulio and Petrov excuse themselves for a private discussion. Giulio instructs Hana to stay put until his return, and though reluctant, she nods. Petrov also assigns Cyril to watch over Sei in his absence. With the men gone, Hana discreetly contacts Eunseong, who informs her he's been helping with a security sweep of the ship. Before she can probe further, Sei steps closer, her gaze piercing. She suggests moving indoors, pointing out the risks of remaining outside, where tall buildings could serve as cover for snipers. Sei casually mentions that the party organizers likely accounted for such threats. Hana, unsettled, listens as Sei drops another bombshell: Mujin Kang will not be attending the party tonight. Startled, Hana presses for details, but Sei only warns her not to trust anyone, no matter what they claim. Sei's revelations continue as she reveals that she designed the bracelet Hana is wearing. She explains its dual function: it holds sedatives but also a stimulant and antidote, activated by rotating the blue diamond 90 degrees. Sei confesses she never shared this feature with Giulio but is entrusting Hana with the knowledge because she likes her. Hana finds herself both wary and intrigued by Sei's enigmatic charm. She wonders if this captivating personality was what once drew Giulio to her. Intrigued, Hana asks Sei why she's sharing such critical information. Sei's answer is cryptic but revealing: she sees a reflection of her younger self in Hana. She advises Hana to trust her instincts and warns that the Mujin Kang who might appear tonight is likely an imposter. Hana's curiosity deepens, and she questions the real Mujin Kang's whereabouts. Sei speculates that he might be watching from the shadows, perhaps orchestrating his own death by sending a decoy. Before Hana can press further, the tension is shattered by the unmistakable presence of Gavin Smith. Acting quickly, she tells Sei to sit down and summon extra guards. Turning to Eunseong, she directs him to position himself at the opposite end of the venue and block all escape routes. To buy more time, she provides Eunseong with a fabricated description of their target, knowing it will keep him busy. As Hana begins her pursuit of Gavin Smith, she notices all the waitstaff, including Smith, are dressed in identical black bow ties, a detail she hopes will work in her favor. However, Smith seems to vanish into thin air as she closes in. Out of nowhere, a sudden blow sends her reeling. An unknown assailant looms over her, his voice dripping with malice as he declares, "You'll never understand how long I've waited for this moment." Startled by the sudden attack, Hana stares at Cyril Kuzmin, fear evident in her voice. "Don't you know today is a day of truce?" she pleads. Kuzmin's expression hardens, his voice cold and unyielding. "My only goal is to kill you." With ruthless determination, he slams her against the wall, his grip tightening around her neck. The malice in his eyes mirrors the torment he seeks to repay. Struggling for air, Hana whispers to herself, "What goes around, comes around." Her vision blurs as dizziness overtakes her, but a sudden memory surfaces, Giulio's promise to help her find her brother. Clinging to that thought, she realizes this cannot be the end. Summoning every ounce of strength, she strikes Kuzmin, forcing him to stagger back. Seizing the opportunity, she pulls out a concealed dagger and thrusts it into his hand, overpowering him. As Kuzmin collapses, defeated, Hana's thoughts turn to Giulio. Doubts and questions fill her mind, but she knows she must act quickly. She considers continuing her pursuit of Gavin Smith but pauses, wondering if Giulio might already be searching for her. Just then, her eyes land on a familiar figure, Oslo. With a plan forming, Hana heads toward him. To execute her scheme, she accidentally collides with a passing waiter, spilling drinks onto her dress. Oslo's companion offers her a handkerchief, his gesture polite and warm. As Oslo's gaze meets hers, recognition flickers in his eyes. The other man asks if she's Korean and introduces himself as the ship's owner. Seizing the moment, Hana lightly touches his chest, suggesting their meeting must be fate. She fabricates a story about a stranger accosting her and presses herself closer, asking if he could shelter her. Intrigued, the man agrees, offering to escort her away from the chaos. On the way, Hana feigns concern about imposing on him, but he reassures her, admitting he was bored with the party. He leads her to a private room on the second floor, mentioning its quiet seclusion. Hana recalls Sei's warnings to remain wary. Could this man be a decoy? If so, he might still hold valuable ties to the real Mujin Kong. Meanwhile, from the shadows, Gavin Smith watches Hana leave with the supposed Mujin Kong. In another part of the ship, a private room hosts three men deep in discussion. One seeks guidance from their boss, who instructs them to compile detailed profiles of all the waitstaff on board. Regarding Hana Lee, the boss decides, continue watching her. Things are about to get interesting. Hana quietly follows the man into the room, ignoring Oslo's whispered warning that it might not be safe. With unwavering determination, she assures him she knows exactly what she's doing. Still, Oslo hesitates, concern etched on his face as he watches her enter. Inside, the man uncorks a bottle of wine, setting out 2 crystal glasses, and offers Hana a robe to deal with the stain on her clothes. Her sharp eyes sweep the room, quickly spotting a surveillance camera hidden overhead. She suspects there's also a concealed listening device nearby. The man encourages her to relax, calling it the least he can do for a fellow compatriot. She takes the opportunity to shift the conversation, asking about the ship's ownership and coaxing him to reveal his name. He reluctantly admits he's Mujin Kong. Hana then weaves a fabricated story about her sister meeting a lover named Mujin Kong, hinting that he might be a womanizer. With a playful smirk, she mentions her attraction to bad boys, casually running her hand along his leg. While doing so, she discreetly checks him for weapons, confirming he's unarmed. Acting swiftly, she grabs him by the collar and flips him over, demanding his real identity. She warns him not to lie, insisting the guards outside are there to watch him, not protect him. She presses for the location of the true mastermind, but the man stammers, claiming he doesn't know. He reveals he once received a mysterious call from a Cambodian number. Without hesitation, Hana orders him to dial it immediately, convinced the real Mujin Kong is watching and will be forced to act. She fires her gun, and the sound brings the guards rushing in. Oslo bursts into the room, alarmed, but Hana silences him with a sharp gesture, focused on the voice on the other end of the line. She notices it's modulated, ignoring the man's weak protests. Her sole focus is finding her missing brother, Dewey. She demands answers, warning that failure to cooperate will lead to the same fate as the subdued man. A single gunshot shatters the tense silence, ending the man's part in the confrontation. On the other end of the line, the voice calmly denies having Hana's brother but hints he's nearby. With a cryptic remark about the party nearing its end, the voice advises Hana to stay calm and promises they'll meet again before cutting the connection. Hana absorbs the ominous message, her mind racing. If the party is truly ending, she realizes Giulio must be in immediate danger. Elsewhere on the ship, Giulio issues urgent orders to his subordinates, "Find Hana and bring her to me." His growing determination, laced with desperation, sets the stage for the inevitable consequences to come. Oslo gently takes Hana's hand, urging her to slow down, but she pulls away sharply. Her voice is firm as she demands to know who Mujin Kang's target is. Oslo hesitates, explaining that Mujin is watching them and they need to keep up the pretense of a quarrel. Trying to shift the focus, he changes the subject, but Hana's persistence cuts through. She presses him again, warning that this is his last chance to answer truthfully. With visible reluctance, Oslo finally reveals that Giulio Parenti is the target. Hana's mind races as she questions why someone impersonating Giulio would now want him deceased. Before she can dig deeper, a sniper's laser suddenly locks onto Oslo. Hana reacts instantly, yanking him out of harm's way just in time. Breathing heavily, she warns Oslo that Mujin Kang seems determined to destroy anyone connected to her. She urges him to protect himself, adding coldly that Mujin is no longer their Valentine's Day client. When Oslo asks what she plans to do, she declares she must save Giulio Parenti because he promised to help find her missing brother. Preparing for the dangers ahead, she tears her dress for easier movement. Just as she's about to leave, the door opens, and Giulio steps into the room. Hana orders Oslo to leave, insisting he get away before the other agents become involved. Turning to Giulio, she advises him to go as well, revealing that he is Mujin Kang's target, but Giulio hesitates, questioning her plans. She explains that she's going after Mujin, her gaze falling briefly on the bloodstains streaking his clothes. They decide to step into the room to continue their conversation. Hana immediately asks about his injuries, but Giulio counters with a faint smirk, asking if she really thinks the blood is his. He explains it came from his fight with would-be attackers, his tone casual but his expression weary. Without warning, Giulio pulls her into a tight embrace. Relief floods his voice as he admits he feared for her life, especially after seeing a bullet fly past them earlier. Assured of her safety, he finally shares a critical piece of information. Her brother isn't on the ship and seems to have escaped unharmed. Giulio moves to pour them both a drink while making a quick call, ordering his men to deal with the remaining threats and prepare for his arrival at the hotel. Just as he's about to lift his glass, he suddenly staggers, confusion flickering across his face. He looks at Hana, asking about the drink, and she calmly replies, "I don't drink on the job." Giulio begins to stumble after taking a drink. Suddenly, he pulls his gun and fires several shots into the body of the supposed Mujin Kang. Startled, Hana demands to know what he's doing, her mind racing as she wonders what might have been in the drink he consumed. Before she can get him under control, Lorenzo bursts into the room, announcing that they need to leave immediately. The FBI is swarming the ship. At Yuri Petrov's hotel, Hana and Lorenzo assist Giulio, who is still visibly affected by the drink. Hana warns Lorenzo that Giulio becomes agitated when touched by anyone other than her or him. Lorenzo, unfazed, remarks that she should be used to Giulio's quirks by now. As they enter the hotel, Yuri approaches, assuring them it's a secure location where no one can enter without permission. Yuri examines Giulio briefly and asks if he was drugged or simply knocked out. Too drained to explain, Hana hands Yuri a phone connected to Mujin Kang. She admits she can't unlock it but believes he can. She instructs him to install a location tracker and duplicate the data, emphasizing that the information is crucial. Her tone leaves no room for argument, making it clear she's issuing an order. As they move past Yuri, he suggests Hana use the supplies Rose provided. He reveals that the wine Giulio drank contained a stimulant mixed with an unnamed aphrodisiac. He also adds that the antidote capsule will briefly shock his system but should bring him back to normal quickly. Curious, Hana asks what would happen if they didn't administer the antidote. Yuri warns that leaving Giulio in this state would only complicate things for her. Once they've guided Giulio to the bed, Hana dismisses Lorenzo. He questions why she wants him to leave, but she convinces him by pointing out his injury and urging him not to make her worry. Lorenzo offers to send someone to assist her, but she declines, insisting she can handle the mafia boss alone. Before leaving, Lorenzo gives her a few tips on managing Giulio. Hana contemplates how to wake Giulio but suddenly notices he's no longer on the bed. Hearing the shower running, she heads to the bathroom and finds him fully clothed, standing under the water. She asks if he's coming to his senses, but Giulio either demands she leave or sarcastically suggests she find a different room. Their conversation turns playful, filled with light banter, until Giulio suddenly doubles over in pain. Hana urges him to stay in control, helping him back to his feet. Together, they leave the bathroom, but just as she's about to guide him back to bed, he tilts her head toward him and kisses her. Water drips from his soaked clothes as it pools on the floor beneath them. Their eyes lock, and the kiss grows more fervent. In the heat of the moment, Giulio pulls the hairpin from Hana's hair and suddenly pierces himself with it. Alarmed, Hana demands to know what he's doing, but he just warns her to leave, his voice strained. He tells her that if she stays, he won't be able to stop himself from pouncing on her like an animal. Her glare is sharp as she retorts that she might bleed out one day because of his reckless behavior, but something like this isn't enough to kill her. She then gives him a simple instruction, just hold me. They move to the bed, and while Giulio wraps his arms around her, Hana's thoughts start to spiral. She questions whether she should give him the antidote, even if it sends him into shock. As she debates, Giulio suddenly grips her neck, apologizing in a low, almost tender voice. He tells her that if she's already starting to regret being here, then it's too late to back out. His expression shifts, and he begins to tease her, making ridiculous claims about making every inch of her his until she's completely intoxicated by him. Meanwhile, in a distant part of the city, Gavin Smith returns to a dimly lit hideout, now wearing a different outfit. His partner immediately notices and questions the change, pointing out that he'd been dressed as a waiter during the party. Gavin explains that the waiters were being interrogated, so he had to disguise himself as a delivery guy to escape unnoticed. His partner, however, assures him that no one would have recognized him, even under close scrutiny of the staff list. As the two converse, it's revealed that Gavin's partner is none other than Hana's brother, Dewey. Gavin mentions seeing many faces at the party, but one caught his attention. He tells Dewey that he saw Hana with Giulio Parenti. The way they looked at each other, he adds, made it seem like they were deeply in love. The next morning, Giulio wakes up and lightly brushes his fingers across Hana's face, waking her in the process. She teases him, asking if he's checking to see if she's still alive. He averts his gaze and admits it, confirming her suspicion. Pressing further, Hana asks if he's wondering whether he forced himself on her. With a sly smile, she tells him that last night was simply an exchange to fulfill each other's needs. But inside, she calculates that the more he desires her, the closer she'll get to achieving her own goals. Giulio smirks and remarks that her words suggest she wants the same thing he does right now. She laughs at his attempt and turns away, making it clear she's not in the mood. She warns him not to touch her for the next 2 days and he chuckles, agreeing to her terms, and steals a quick kiss before letting it go. Later, they meet Yuri Petrov, who addresses Hana as one and informs her they've finished examining Mujin Kang's phone. Sliding the device over, he reveals that the last call made from the phone came from inside the ship they were on the previous day. This means that despite using a stand-in, the real Mujin Kang attended the Moon Shipping Company's party. Yuri then asks if Hana gleaned anything useful during her phone call with Mujin Kang. She explains that Mujin claimed not to have Dewey, though she isn't sure if he was being honest. Still, she thinks it's likely true. She adds that with Gavin Smith actively moving, it's clear things aren't going smoothly for Mujin Kang. Shifting the focus, Yuri asks Hana for her opinion on extracting information from Logan. He suspects Mujin Kang might be Logan's client, and since Hana knows Logan better, she could have an edge. Hana says she'd like to help, but Logan is steadfast about protecting his client's privacy. Suddenly, Sei interrupts, handing Hana a photograph. She says it's an enhanced image of the real Mujin Kang and asks if Hana recognizes him. Hana studies the picture, trying to make out the face. Lost in thought, she notes the resemblance to Eunseong and realizes she hasn't seen him all morning. Hana remarks that Romano and Lorenzo are injured, but Eunseong is clearly missing. Lost in thought, Giulio leans in and teasingly asks why she's so absorbed in another man's photo, playfully suggesting she might already be tired of him. He then shares that he's just received an update about the person who betrayed her, revealing that the betrayer was recently the target of a murder attempt. Hana is taken aback by this news and wonders who would want to kill Taejun. Giulio hints that only one person could be behind such an act, and without wasting time, he makes a call to find out Mujin Kang's current location. A man stands in the spotlight, surrounded by a crowd of cameramen. This is Muho Kang, brother of Mujin Kang. He prepares to deliver a public speech, his tone somber and weighty. He declares that foreign criminals have targeted an innocent citizen and mourns the demise of Hana Lee, a devoted member of the Overseas Narcotics Investigations Team, who died tragically in a terrorist bombing. Muho also reveals that Hana's colleague, Taejun Choi, lies in a coma, clinging to life. Then, Muho shares another heartbreaking truth. His half-brother, Mujin Kang, CEO of Mun Shipping Company, is the latest victim in this grim chain of events. Muho recounts how, after hosting a party, Mujin was brutally slaughtered, his body discarded into the sea. With visible anguish, he admits it is time to reveal a family secret. Mujin is his estranged half-brother, a bond they only renewed in adulthood. As he broadcasts this shocking revelation, the real Mujin Kang watches the speech on his phone from a restaurant, alive and well. Moments later, Logan Valentine enters the restaurant and confronts Mujin. Logan, stern and resolute, announces he is terminating their contract, accusing Mujin of targeting his agents, a breach of their agreement. Mujin adamantly denies any involvement in the attack and, when questioned further, suggests the FBI might be behind it all. Mujin Kang smirks, turning to Logan Valentine with a look that says he has bigger concerns. With a knowing grin, he gestures to the news broadcast still playing, highlighting the dramatic announcement of Mujin Kang's supposed demise. He points out how Muho Kang's intricate political games have gripped the public, steering them to demand swift justice for the criminals involved, including the elusive Giulio Parenti. Mujin leans in, his eyes sharp and probing, as he poses a single question: who do you think benefits most from all this chaos? Logan falters, his thoughts racing. The implication dawns on him: this may all be unfolding exactly as Mujin planned. The realization chills him, and he resolves to sever ties with Mujin, sensing the man's dangerous cunning. Logan turns to leave, prepared to cut ties with the Mun Shipping Company. But before he can fully express his intent, Mujin interrupts, his tone calm yet magnetic. He makes an enticing offer, 5 times the previous pay. Logan pauses, momentarily caught off guard, before spinning back to face Mujin, questioning what he wants in return. Mujin's response is clear and deliberate: your job is simple. Protect Hana Lee. Make sure not a single hair on her head is harmed. After their exchange, Mujin Kang, or Eunseong, as he is sometimes known, returns home. He steps into a hot shower, letting the steam envelop him as his thoughts wander. He recalls Hana's behavior at the recent party, analyzing her actions. To him, her emotions seemed fabricated, raising doubts about whether her feelings for Giulio Parenti were genuine or just another act. In his private musings, he dismisses Parenti as an amateur. After what feels like an excessively long shower, he steps out and re-enters the room, only to find Giulio Parenti waiting for him. They exchange a long, charged stare before Eunseong breaks the silence with a cool remark: looks like you've got the wrong room. Giulio, unbothered, lights a cigarette and delivers an unexpected message: you're fired. Eunseong smirks, questioning Giulio's motives and hinting that his real concern might be losing Hana to him. The tension spikes as words turn to action. In a heated moment, the two men grab each other by the collar, their mutual disdain evident. Giulio glares at Eunseong and warns him to stay silent, but Eunseong, ever the provocateur, pushes further. Frustrated, Giulio slams him to the ground. He raises a fist, ready to strike, but before he can follow through, Hana bursts into the room. Her voice cuts through the tension as she demands to know what's happening and instructs Giulio to lower his hand. Reluctantly, Giulio lets go of Eunseong's collar. Hana demands an explanation, her tone firm. Giulio states he's firing Eunseong as her bodyguard. Her eyes widen in surprise, though her mind quickly races. She knows she can't let this happen. If Eunseong is truly Mujin Kong, they need to keep him close and monitor his every move. Before she can respond, Eunseong stands and dusts himself off, reminding Hana of his earlier warning to keep her distance from Giulio. He redirects the conversation to her missing brother, pointing out that the photo she showed him contains an overlooked clue, a message Dui was trying to send. Hana flinches, her curiosity piqued, and asks if he discovered something new. Eunseong smirks. Indeed, but since I've just been fired, I'm not obligated to share it. He extends his hand toward her, offering a partnership. Join forces with me, and I'll help you find your brother. Besides, he adds with a sly grin, now's not the time to be romantically involved with a mobster. Hana crosses her arms, her tone sharp. Do you expect me to beg for your help? I don't need you, I can find him on my own. Turning on her heel, she storms out of the room. Giulio follows quickly, his expression unreadable. Once alone in another room, Hana's thoughts spiral. Could Eunseong be right? Her original plan was simple, use Giulio to her advantage. Yet, deep down, she feels a flicker of something she shouldn't, a hope for something more. She shakes her head, determined not to stray from her goal. A knock at the door interrupts her thoughts. Giulio's voice calls out, pleading for her to let him in. Hana snaps, insisting he stay out. As she reaches for the door to send him away, her phone rings. For a moment, hope surges, could it be her brother? She answers, and Dui's voice comes through, filled with urgency. Hana, are you okay? You need to get out of there immediately. What are you doing with someone like Giulio Parenti? He's involved with the mafia, you can't trust him. Hana freezes, her mind racing as Dui's words sink in. Hana exhales deeply, her voice steady as she speaks into the phone. Yes, I know Giulio is a mobster, Dui. But I've made my choice. This is the best way to find you. Resolute, she opens the door, letting Giulio into the room. Her brother's voice trembles with concern as he warns her again about the dangers of dealing with a mafia boss, his fear for her safety clear. But Hana stands firm, cutting through his worry with a single question, where are you? Dui hesitates, then admits he can't share too many details over the phone, wary of potential wiretaps. Hana presses him for coordinates instead. After a brief pause, he provides them. Her determination hardens as she promises, stay where you are. I'll make sure they pay for what they've done to you. His voice wavers with emotion. I miss you, Hana. Please don't do anything reckless. She softens, her tone gentle. Just wait a little longer, okay? I'll find you. As her conversation ends, she feels a hand gently taking hers. Startled, she turns to find Giulio standing close, his dark eyes calm but intent. I'm coming with you, he says. Hana's brow furrows. Why? This is about finding my brother. There's nothing in it for you. Giulio tilts his head slightly, a hint of mischief in his expression. Because Dui matters to you. And I don't like that your attention is on someone else. But if helping you means bringing your focus back to me, I'll do what I can. Hana blinks, momentarily caught off guard, but she quickly composes herself. There's something I need to tell you, she begins, her voice low. She explains that during her time as a Valentine's Day agent, she once put a man behind bars. While in prison, the man lost his entire family. Blinded by grief and rage, He swore to make her feel the same pain, vowing to take everything she held dear. At the time, she dismissed his threats as empty words. But then my brother disappeared, she continues, her voice faltering slightly. And for the first time in years, I dreamed about that man. He's gone now, he died years ago. But his words, they still haunt me. It feels like his shadow hasn't left. Hana's voice trembles as she confesses, I've always feared that the chain of malice I set in motion might one day come back to trap me. That's why I keep people at a distance. I'm afraid of letting anyone in. Tears begin to pool in her eyes, spilling over as her emotions overwhelm her. Giulio, ever her steady confidant, reaches out and gently wipes her tears away. Without hesitation, he leans in, pressing a soft, reassuring kiss to her trembling lips. These fears are unfounded, he murmurs, his voice low and comforting. You're stronger than you think. Moved by her vulnerability, Giulio decides it's time to share his own darkness. He takes a deep breath, his gaze distant as he begins. I once had a mother with raven hair and fair skin. She was involved in an affair, but my father, blinded by love, forgave her. My younger brother, Flavio, couldn't. He hated her lover. And then. His voice falters, heavy with the weight of memory. Flavio was killed by that man. I found his body in the chapel. Giulio's expression hardens as he continues. I lost my mind. I hunted that man down and dismembered him, piece by piece, sending what was left to my mother. Then. I killed her too. Slowly. Painfully. I made sure her death was more agonizing than Flavio's. He looks at Hana with shadowed eyes. That's the kind of man I am. Ruthless. Merciless. Even with my own blood. Do you despise me now? Hana's gaze softens, unshaken by his confession. Do you remember the first time we met, in the trailer, she asks gently. You looked like a man who was ready to embrace death. I don't despise you, Giulio. And I'm not afraid of you. If anything, I understand you more now. Her words draw them closer, culminating in a deep, passionate kiss. For a moment, the weight of their past seems lighter, as if they've found solace in each other's scars. Yet, as they part, Hana feels the weight of her secret resolve. She knows this moment is fleeting, a fragile illusion of peace. Once she finds her brother, she will have to leave. 2 days, she tells herself. That's all she can allow herself. But for now, she clings to the intimacy they share, letting it be enough. At Dewey's secluded hideout, Gavin Smith paces, his concern palpable. This situation is spiraling out of control, he says, his voice tinged with frustration. I can't believe Hana and Giulio are involved. Dewey shakes his head firmly. It's not what it looks like, he replies, defending his sister. Hana approached Giulio because of bad intel from Taejun Choi. She didn't have a choice. He pauses before adding, besides, I've already given her my location. We'll clear everything up face to face. Gavin listens, his brow furrowed in thought. He's struck by the depth of Dewey's concern for his sister. Memories of their first meeting flash through his mind, Cambodia, the site of the bombing. Dewey had been relentless, eventually convincing Gavin to join forces with him. Their alliance had seemed straightforward enough, until the shocking news of Mujin Kang's boat party reached them. Gavin recalls the surreal event. Mujin Kang, the infamous manipulator, had invited all the criminals he'd ever impersonated to a grand celebration. What began as an extravagant gathering had devolved into chaos, leaving several prominent figures deceased. The memory of that night unsettles Gavin, not least because it had forced him into an unthinkable position, taking up arms to protect someone as unpredictable as Giulio Parenti. As Gavin sifts through these thoughts, his phone rings abruptly, snapping him back to the present. Answering, he hears an unsettling voice on the other end. We've got a complication, the caller says curtly. Check the link we just sent you. When he and Dewey open the link, they find Moo Ho Kang's broadcast insinuating that Mujin Kong is deceased. The caller quickly informs them it's all fake news, but it has already swayed public opinion. That's not the worst of it. Dui Lee is now wanted for drug trafficking and attempted murder. The FBI and CIA have issued arrest warrants, and someone has uncovered Gavin Smith's connection to Dewey. The caller identifies this person as Matvey Sergey, who is already tracking them down. The caller urges Gavin to run. Without hesitation, he grabs his things, starts the car, and tells Dewey to pack up. Dewey reminds him that his sister is on her way, so Gavin tells him to call her. He even hands Dewey the phone he used during his undercover mission in New York, despite vowing never to use it again after betraying Giulio Parenti. They leave in a rush, and Gavin promises to call the mafia boss as they drive away. Meanwhile, Mujin Kang and Logan Valentine are in a car. Logan casually asks why Giulio Parenti has an issue with him. Mujin admits it's probably because his attempts to get closer to Hana Lee didn't sit well with Giulio. Privately, Mujin reflects that being fired might actually be a safer outcome given the risks he's taking. Just then, Logan gets a notification. He warns Mujin that the FBI is on the move and suggests they leave the area immediately. Coincidentally, Mujin spots the car carrying Dewey and Gavin. Logan instantly recognizes Dewey, Hannah's brother. Mujin orders the driver to follow them and insists they can't lose the car. With a mischievous glint, he declares they'll capture Hannah's brother alive, then he pulls out his gun and begins shooting at their vehicle. In a tense phone call, Giulio speaks urgently with Yuri Petrov, sharing alarming news that the FBI is on the move, with the information coming from Gavin Smith. He stresses that Gavin has advised them to evacuate Hong Kong as quickly as possible. Yuri confirms this and suggests they finish their business and meet at Repulse Bay in the next 15 minutes. However, Giulio grimly explains that leaving immediately isn't an option. Yuri quickly figures out that the problem is related to one. He recommends using the drugs at Giulio's disposal to knock her out, warning him not to mention any concerns about running low on supplies or side effects. Giulio stays silent, his understanding clear through the call. Yuri goes on to explain that the drugs hidden in one's bracelet contain not only a stimulant but also a small amount of propofol, a powerful sleep-inducing agent. He reassures Giulio that the sedative has no side effects, as it's meant for medical use. Giulio now faces a choice, either extract one while she's unconscious or stay put and risk being captured by the FBI. The call ends abruptly. One of Giulio's associates asks what they should do next and Giulio tells him to organize an evacuation for the team and assures them he'll join them later. He also asks for a syringe, hinting at a more secretive plan in motion. Meanwhile, Mujin Kong keeps firing at Gavin Smith's car as he stays on their tail. Gavin and Dewey, confused, wonder why the car behind them is shooting out of nowhere. Dewey asks if Matvey Sergey has already found them. Despite their questions, they have no idea who's after them. They decide to take a sharp turn off the narrow road, but the car pursuing them stays right on their heels, firing relentlessly. Before they can react, the two cars collide, sending Gavin's vehicle crashing into a guardrail. As the dust settles, Mujin Kong steps out of his car and approaches the wrecked vehicle. Seeing them unconscious inside, he can't help but feel he's achieved his goal. At the same time, Hannah prepares to rescue her brother. She tells Giulio with urgency, "We need to hurry. I've decoded the coordinates, and he's close to Stanley Bay." Giulio, entranced by her, takes the opportunity and kisses her deeply. She tries to remind him of the timing, but he doesn't stop. In a quiet, calculated move, he pulls out a syringe and injects it into her neck. Hannah, shocked, knocks the syringe from his hand and demands to know what he's doing. But before she can fully process it, drowsiness hits her, and all she hears are Giulio's apologies before she collapses into his arms. Meanwhile, at the chaotic crash site, Mujin Kong yanks open the door of the wrecked car. Dewey, regaining consciousness, asks who he is and he responds by pointing a gun at Dewey's chin and mentioning his special relationship with Dewey's sister. Surprised, Dewey asks Mujin Kang how he knows his sister, and he responds with confidence, "There's a lot more I know than you might think." He thanks Dewey for sharing the photo earlier, recognizing his skill in hiding the message. He explains that red oak is an odd choice for shipbuilding because it's vulnerable to water damage. By sharing the photo of the floor, he meant to hint that he was aboard an anchored ship, but unfortunately, his sister missed the message. Dewey, stunned, curses under his breath and demands to know what Mujin Kang wants. Overcome by the situation, he slumps. Remaining calm, Mujin Kang tells Dewey he can't afford for him to pass out yet, since their conversation hasn't even begun. Just then, Gavin Smith coughs and stares, almost certain that this is the real Mujin Kang. Mujin Kang, surprised, asks if they've met before. Gavin Smith, visibly agitated, challenges him for following them to this remote spot. Mujin Kang replies, "You sure have a lot to say for someone whose life is hanging by a thread." He then points his gun at Gavin and pulls the trigger. A single shot echoes through the air. Logan rushes out, scolding Mujin Kang for going too far this time. Mujin Kang casually responds that he was just giving them a scare. Logan quickly assesses the situation and tells his client that the person in the car is Won's brother. Before he can finish, a gun is pointed at his head. Mujin Kang coldly asks, "Have you forgotten who your client is?" He warns Logan not to test his patience. Then, he orders him to clean up the scene and get Dewey and Gavin into their car. As he turns to leave, he comments, "Time to fully embrace my role as the villain." Meanwhile, aboard a ship, Hana jolts awake, shouting her brother's name. Suddenly, it hits her. The surroundings resemble Yuri Petrov's cruise ship. Her thoughts race as she recalls Giulio, wondering why he stopped her from seeing her brother and why he made all those promises of help. Fueled by rage, she strides out of her room and bursts into a meeting. She cautiously asks, "Am I interrupting something important?" Giulio, seated in the meeting, rises as Hana enters and asks how she's feeling. She finds his question painfully ironic, considering he was the one who had forced a syringe into her neck. Suppressing her rising frustration, she looks him in the eye and demands, "Where is my brother?" The room grows uncomfortably silent. After a moment, Giulio admits that her brother is likely no longer at the coordinates he gave her. He explains that he had no other choice. His actions were necessary because the FBI was about to launch a search operation. Hana, torn between anger and disappointment, grabs Giulio by the shirt, her voice trembling as she reminds him of his promise to help her and her misplaced trust in him. Giulio doesn't respond, his expression unreadable as he stares at her. After a long, tense pause, she lets go of his shirt and declares that she's leaving. She's determined to find her brother, even if it means swimming through the open sea. Giulio calls after her as she storms out, but his words go unanswered. As Hana storms off the ship, tears streaking down her face, Giulio reaches for her hand, but she slaps it away, accusing him of being a hypocrite. Her voice trembles with anger as she questions his motives, but before she can say more, her phone rings. Desperately hoping it's her brother, she answers quickly. Instead, a chilling voice introduces himself as Mujin Kang. With a trembling voice, Hana demands to know where her brother is. Mujin, speaking with feigned remorse, admits there was some physical confrontation but reassures her that her brother is alive. He then candidly confesses he intended to kill her brother but stopped because of the striking resemblance between him and Hana. Mujin cryptically hints that she should already know who he really is. He continues, revealing he has traced her location through the call and plans to share her coordinates with the FBI once they hang up. He taunts her, questioning what will happen to the dilettante beside her and warns her not to get caught up in his affairs. Finally, he invites her to join him if she wants to see her brother again. Still on the call, Hana pieces together Mujin's true identity. Her voice tightens as she realizes it's Eunseong Yoo. Mujin chuckles, amused by how quickly she figured it out. Furious, she threatens that the next time they meet, she'll hold a gun to his neck and make him regret his existence. She ends the call and turns to Giulio, demanding to know if he knew any of this. Giulio pulls her into an embrace, murmuring an apology. But Hana, still distraught, pushes for answers about her brother's safety. Giulio reassures her, saying he's already paid the price to protect her brother. When she asks to whom, Giulio calmly replies, to death. He explains that Logan's team, including Valentine, will be watching Mujin Kong closely. Hana, however, remains skeptical, pointing out that Mujin is a client of Logan's. Giulio smirks, noting that mercenaries' loyalty lies with the highest bidder. Despite this, Hana presses Giulio for a guarantee, proposing a deal. She will go to the FBI and testify that Giulio is a victim if it ensures her brother's safety. Surprisingly, Giulio agrees, teasing that she's a bad villain who manipulated him, while he's the nice villain who let it happen. Then, with a sly grin, he promises she won't have to go to the FBI at all. He leans in and cheekily requests a kiss, but Hana narrows her eyes and asks what happens if she refuses. With a mischievous smile, he says he'll simply have to steal one, brushing a kiss against her cheek. Rolling her eyes, Hana grabs his shirt, half playful, half serious, and tells him to stop acting like a dilettante. Pressing against him, she whispers that this might be their last night together. Giulio, smirking, reminds her that she's the one who initiated the moment.